Why does mentalism seem to play so well for an audience when magic, doesn't always? I don't expect everyone to be happy with my answer, but this is something I think we need to discuss because I think we can all benefit from this topic. In this episode of Erudite Magic, I'm going to distill the lessons that we can learn from mentalism into tips that everyone can apply regardless of the type of magic you perform. The bottom line is we can resist changing and ignore what we can learn, or we can embrace change and have an open and growth mindset. As we begin, you might be wondering, what is mentalism and what makes it so special? Ted Anneman, who we've discussed a lot on the channel and one of the founding fathers of modern mentalism, called it a grown-up phase of magic and mystery. But definitions in the magic literature are actually pretty rare. And as far as I can tell, there aren't any hard or fast rules. Generally speaking, mentalism is defying the natural laws as it relates to someone's thoughts or decisions. I get it, it's not a perfect definition, but I think as we go on, you'll start to see some of the differences and what makes actual mentalism. Typically, though, we can consider it revealing someone's thoughts, predicting their future actions, or seeing something through their eyes. Those are all pretty standard performance pieces for mentalists. Now that we sort of defined it, what makes mentalism so special that you should care about it? Well, it seems like audiences actually prefer it to regular magic. How do we know this? Well, studies have told us. We've actually surveyed people. Most recently, this has been documented in Joshua Jay's astonishing essay, Magic by the Numbers. There's a review of this coming soon. But in the survey that he reported, 50% of the people preferred to watch mind reading over any other form of magic. But if you're a diehard magician, perhaps you agree with my friend Mao.
Well, people are stupid.
But it's not just the statistics, it's also our own observations. Mentalists have almost always gotten one of the top spots and continue to get the top spot in the public's eye. Back in the day, it was Dunninger with his radio show that was broadcast nationwide. Uri Geller amazed and shocked the world with his own brand of mental powers. And of course today, Darren Brown has accumulated a rabid following worldwide. If any of your friends have ever experienced mentalism, you're likely to hear about it later, and we're going to dissect why that is later in this episode. It's important to know at this point that I'm not knocking magic. I'm merely pointing out that many audiences prefer to see it and trying to figure out what can we learn from that. Why do they prefer to see mentalism over traditional magic? I think there are definitely some takeaways we could all apply. So what can we learn from mentalism and mentalists? What makes this type of magic more compelling to an audience? After all, many magicians out there are saying mentalism is boring. And I think that there's an irony there that magicians think that mentalism is boring, but audiences don't.
What? I don't understand.
To get to the lessons we need to learn, we need to understand, how is mentalism different from magic? The first thing is that it requires communication between the performer and the participant. It's interactive. Like Doug DeMint says in his book, Calculated Thoughts, mentalism cannot even function in an environment consisting exclusively of performers and spectators. Unlike other forms of entertainment, it exists specifically as a product of the relationship between the practitioner and the audience. Jugglers can throw objects in the privacy of their own rooms. Magicians can produce rabbits in empty theaters. Singers can sing to vacant halls. But the mentalist requires the existence of a willing participant in order to read a mind. This infers that it's about people and not necessarily the performer. Sure, the performer is the one who's going to receive the applause and demonstrate the ability, but they're extracting those things from a participant's mind. So that participant is an integral part of the presentation, and the demonstration is going to be only as interesting as what's in that participant's head. Because mentalism is so interactive, the participant is interested in seeing if you can get what's in their head. I mean, this is a very private thing. It's something that belongs to them. And yet everyone wants to tell people about themselves. And that means that your audience wants to hear what's in that person's head. So already the interactiveness has created interest. Not only that, but if you could have a superpower, undoubtedly reading people's minds would be one of the top superpowers requested. Which brings me to my second point. As Bob Cassidy points out in his book, The Artful Mentalism of Bob Cassidy 2, Fundamentals, mentalism is plausible. In the minds of your audience, it's highly unlikely that a rabbit actually materializes into a hat, as an example. But on the other hand, scientists, academics, and even the military have been studying extrasensory perception for decades. They want this to be a real thing. Many people believe in neuro-linguistic programming, or at least the power of influence. And that's because this is a real thing. There are ways to talk to people to influence how they're thinking. Many of these stem from successful negotiating techniques like anchoring, mirroring, etc. And even if people don't believe in things like NLP, they certainly believe in the power of positive thinking. And these, in a way, influence the thinking of the audience that mentalism could be real. Because it's plausible, that's what makes mentalism magic for adults. The third thing is that it's not a joke. Sure, it can be presented in a comedic way, or there'll be jokes and gags leading up to the mentalism, but the mentalism itself is actually kind of a serious thing. It's not played for laughs. If it is, then I would argue that's more magic and not really mentalism. That's part of the distinction. Sure, you can make your presentations of mentalism playful, but you can't present the whole thing as if it's one big gag and expect the same result. As Harlan Tarbell points out in book 4 of his famous series, the mentalist or performer proceeds to do his act as though it were a genuine example of unusual powers. If presented as mere tricks, the act would not command anywhere near the same interest and spellbound attention, if indeed it didn't fall flat. So one way of looking at this is that mentalists are more of method actors. Sure, they may give a disclaimer at the beginning of their show, but then they're going to proceed as if that disclaimer never happened. Rarely do you see a successful mentalist who gives a wink and a nod to the audience that all of this is just played for laughs. So what can we do? How can we take some of these lessons and these differences and apply them to what we do? The first lesson I see is to make it personal. When you have someone select a card, who cares? But when you ask someone to think of a childhood friend, now that's meaningful. There are a lot of emotional connections to these types of thoughts, and you're opening up a lot of those neural pathways for the person to connect with what you're doing. So we need to find ways, regardless of the branch of magic that we perform, to make personal connections. For example, if you're performing one-on-one, highlight items that happen in their hands. That's one of the reasons I believe that sponge balls is such a powerful piece. If something's happening under their control, in their hands, they care more about it because they can't believe that it just happened to them. And when you're performing for people, let them make some meaningful choices. Here's a good example of a card trick that has taken on more of a personal meaning. David Regal has a version of the ambitious card routine where he has them draw a dog onto a card and the dog keeps returning. It's a subtle change, and you might think, yeah, it's still a card trick, and I'm not advocating that this becomes mentalism, but it takes on some of those characteristics that make mentalism more appealing to your audience. Another easy way to do this is to ask more questions, and frankly, this is a life hack. If you want to become a better conversationalist or a better performer, then ask people questions. In your performances, ask people what their choice meant. But for them to actually give you a good reason, there has to be a choice that actually could mean something. And don't just ask them that while you do your get ready for your invisible pass. Actually listen and interact with their response. The other big lesson I see here is to take yourself and your magic seriously. When you perform, don't present it in such a way that you discount what you're doing. Many magicians do this out of guilt. It's because the secret is so simple that they're either worried they're going to get caught or they feel guilty that what they're doing doesn't require more work. So they immediately rush past the moment of astonishment with either a joke or moving on to the next item without giving the participant a moment to just bask in that feeling of amazement. But if you do this and you immediately step on the climax of the routine with some sort of joke or moving too quickly, then you ruin the illusion. When you perform a miracle, treat it like a genuine miracle and don't disclaim it or make an awkward joke. Let the gags and jokes happen leading up to the big moment, but let the magic stand on its own. A terrific example of this is the invisible deck. All of the gags and jokes are part of the process leading up to the punchline. And along the way, you're seeing examples of making it personal. People are getting to make decisions. These are thoughts that were only in their head, but they are getting to influence the outcome. But when the moment of magic comes, that's it. There are no more jokes. It's now been brought back to seriousness. And that's why I think this trick hits so hard. At the end of the day, let's not get caught up between the differences between magic and mentalism. There's no reason for us to judge one or the other. But if we see ways that one branch is more successful than another, I think we'd be crazy not to borrow the best from each world. In reality, most people have never seen a magician or a mentalist in person, so I'm sharing all of this just to help make the magic world a better place. If you're a magician and you want to get started into this world of mentalism, but maybe don't know what's possible, then check out this video to see the kinds of things that you can do with mentalism. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading.